She was determined to make it to Mexico City, and all she needed was $200. But that might as well have been $1 million because she could barely pay her bills. But she knew she wanted to go to Mexico City. It was a drive that was within her that she had to fulfill. And so she had just become a member of the Unity family, and she knew that she could put positive thinking towards this, that she could start to hold it and say affirmations and make her way to Mexico City. And so she did just what her teacher had been teaching her. She wrote visions, she put it on Post-it notes, and she got ready to go to Mexico. Except that she knew that she wasn't really feeling it, and that that was part of what you needed to do. Went to her teacher and she said, I just have this feeling I'm not going to make it to Mexico City. And her teacher said, well, of course you're not, because you're not feeling it. You don't believe it. You need to believe that you are going to go to Mexico City. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to know that you are rich before you see it in your bank book. And the way that you're going to do that is you're going to live as if. I want you to go to the store and buy something that you can afford right now that feels a little extravagant to show yourself that you're worthy. So she went to the store and she looked on the shelf, and what she decided to buy was a little jar of olives for $1.29 stuffed with almonds. That made her feel rich that day. So she and her friend, who were going to go to Mexico City, sat by the pool, pretended they were in Mexico, they acted as if, they ate their little olives, and they believed they were going to Mexico, even though neither of them had the $200. So she marched herself down to the travel agent. Who remembers travel agencies? Anybody? Yes, in the past. So she went to the travel agency back in the day when you could make a reservation to go on vacation. So she didn't have to have the money, but she affirmed that she was going to have this $200. She later found herself visiting her mother after she had just talked with her friend Lana. Lana's mother all of a sudden decided she was going to pay for her ticket. So Lana had her $200, she was set to go. And Edwina is thinking, I don't have $200, I want someone to give me $200. And she's going to her mother's, and she's visiting with her mother. She tells her this great story. Isn't it amazing, Mom? Lana's mom gave her $200.
Wink, wink.
And her mom said, that is really fantastic, honey. What are you going to do to make that happen in your life? What is Edwina going to do to get herself to Mexico? What are we going to do to achieve the things that we want to achieve in our life? Edwina decided that she was going to really take a hold of the Unity principles that she eventually put into her book, The 4 Spiritual Laws of Prosperity. She continued to work on this and eventually became so successful that she became a teacher of prosperity. She wrote this book, she's held retreats. She's an amazing, powerful person in the Unity movement. Some of you have seen her before, even at this church. I've also sort of retitled her book for myself, and I call it The 4 Spiritual Laws of Enoughness. When is enough enough? The 4 spiritual laws of well-being, of the good life. That could mean anything. And prosperity truly does mean anything. Prosperity is truly about your consciousness. But to help some of us get out of thinking about it as money, I like to call it well-being, abundance, or enoughness, or wholeness. So what are we going to do to continue to live in this place of wholeness? We started for the last 2 weeks on the first 2 principles that Edwina teaches us. She says the first thing that you want to do is to find your divine purpose. And the divine purpose that we're working with is to be your best God self, to show more of God in the world, to let your Christ light shine. That's your inner purpose. We all have it. And then you do that through whatever your outer work or living might look like. But internally, we're here to be our best self, to make it a better planet, all of these things. So you find your divine purpose, and then you practice step 2, forgiveness. And if you weren't with us the last couple of weeks, you can watch those talks online. We practice forgiveness so that we can get out of our own way, so that we can remove the blocks that are weighing us down. Or as she says, Edwene says, that forgiveness frees us from the endless loop of blame and bad feelings to turn to more important issues of being happy. Forgiveness is very important in this pursuit of living the good life. So we know what we're doing, we've let go of some of our baggage, and now we're ready to set goals. We're ready to decide if we're going to Mexico City and how we're going to get there and what we're going to do about it. Edwene says that you must learn to set goals. Goal setting and developing directed faith can truly have spectacular results, but it only works if you actually do it. There's the rub. I don't know about you, but I have a love-hate relationship with goals. Sometimes I'm all in, and I love them, and I know they're good for me, but man, I just don't like to set them. I like to be more freewheeling. I like to do what Abraham Hicks calls putting the oars in my boat and just floating down the stream. I trust life to do that for me. And I also know the power of intention, of using imagination and will and order. See, I've even clenched my fists to get something done, and that's beautiful too. So I ride the balance of these two, and I invite you to do that. And what I realized is that, like many things, I kind of shifted over into not having too many goals in the last few years. Not some specific ones as much as I wanted, but I know in the past it's worked. I have this one vision board that I did probably 25 years ago. And I remember it because I still have it. And the first thing that was in the middle of this was a KitchenAid mixer. That was success to me. When you had a KitchenAid mixer, you were doing all right. So I wanted a KitchenAid mixer. I also wanted to go to Hawaii, and I wanted something bigger in my job. And by the end of the year, all 3 things had happened. Absolutely. There are so many stories like that. You set this down and you decide. I just read about somebody at the church over in Fox Valley that the board president wrote in the newsletter. She had decided she was going to retire, and she wrote down the goal, and within 2 weeks there had been a layoff at her job, but she was getting a fabulous package to retire early. You write it down and get ready, folks. It's amazing what will happen. And so goals move us from living unconsciously to living consciously. That's what Edwene tells us. And Charles Fillmore, the founder of Unity, said that desire is the onward impulse of the ever-evolving soul. There is an impulse in us to do more, to be more, to accomplish things. Although I notice as I get older, that impulse gets a little smaller. And it gets a little more focused on the inner things that are more important to me. But that impulse is imprinted in us. We read in Psalms 37:4, "Delight yourself in the Lord, for he will give you the desires of your heart." On one level, that sounds like God is the vending machine. Yep, God's going to give me what I want, as long as I put in my desire. But delight yourself in the Lord, God will give you the desires of your heart, also tells us that God gives us those desires, life, spirit, the expansion of the universe, puts desires in us to be more. I think it's that evolutionary pull to keep moving and growing and to be more while loving and accepting exactly where we are. Goals. If you're ready to play with them, Edwene has an entire chapter devoted to this, with every step that you can take, which is very typical of all the goal-setting stuff that you'll read out there in the world. So put down the areas of your life, relationships, financial, health, fun, and then pick 3 goals, and then you'll have 12 goals, and by then my head has exploded. It doesn't work for me anymore. I like something a little bit different. And what I love about Unity is that we can continue to grow. We didn't put the period at the end when Charles said it, or Edwene said it, or anyone said it. We said there is still great knowledge that is coming. We are still learning and growing, so I love research. I love reading about what's working in the world. I'm very practical, just like Charles. What works? Not what have I been told works, or even what used to work, because maybe something better has come along. And I think it has. I think that something that works better for me comes from another book called The One Thing. Anybody read it? Okay, Lizzie's read it? All right. The One Thing. The surprisingly simple truth behind extraordinary results. The One Thing by Gary Keller. Great book. I love it because it's already marked up for me. When you buy it, don't panic. He's already underlined and circled things and drawn arrows. It's a very practical book. So he nails it and he brings it right down to the truth. So this book is another one of those life-changing books for me that I'm always telling you about. This one got me back in love with goals. Back in love with that. And as I think about goals, I think about one of the biggest goals that was ever set. The Great Commission of Jesus. Go out and make disciples of all ye nations. That was a command, that was a goal, that was a life purpose, all wrapped into one. Go out and make it a better world, is what he was saying. This good news that you have about God and the power that is within you, go share that and make sure that everybody gets it. Go out and do that. That is the power of a singular one goal to make your life about. So in this book, we have the chance to ask a very powerful question. And if you are someone who really takes this on, you're going to want to get out a pen, you're going to want to find a little blank spot on your bulletin, and you might want to write this one down. One of the best questions I think has ever been asked. And I'll say it a few times, it's got 3 parts. What one thing? So right there, this is different than a lot of goal setting. What one thing, such that by doing it, meaning you're going to do it, what one thing, such that by doing it, what is one thing, I should say, what is the one thing, such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? What is the one thing, such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? Imagine that. That there is something that if you put your directed faith into it, would have this broad effect, that it would wash over all the other areas of your life. And then once you accomplish that, go ahead and move on to something else. But imagine how much better your life might be if that one thing that's always held you back was something that you finally tackled. And I can tell you that when I did this several years ago at the church that I was at, the results were astounding. What we're doing is we're moving from a misunderstanding of an important word in the English language, priority. Priority is meant to be a singular word. But what have we done in all of our wanting to be bigger and better? We've made it priorities. So now we have multiple priorities, and we all know about multitasking. It doesn't work. So we've gone from having a priority in our life to too many priorities for the most part. So we boil it down to one. So I did this experiment. I love to experiment with things at my last church. And I focused on what I thought was the most helpful thing, that if I could do this one thing at the church, it would be the best for the explosion and the growth of this church. So I focused on what we call ownership in church language. It's a new concept in the last few years that they've put this name on. And what it means is that we move out of thinking that the minister is responsible for everything, or that the minister is even really responsible for anything in a church that is a community-based church like ours. And so I started putting things in place to help people understand how church actually functions instead of how we think it functions. And so we started having meetings and we talked about it on the board, and I was the most productive I have ever been. I had the most fun at work that I had ever had. Everything else just fell away and I could singularly focus on that. Now, of course, I did everything else I needed to do. I wrote my talks and I did classes and I did all of that. But it was the one thing that if I worked on and I studied and I read about it, started to blow the church away. It was amazing. That is the power that I experienced directly by using the question of what one thing could make everything else easier or unnecessary. With an empowered church, everything else that fell on my shoulders became lighter. And so it might be that way in your world. If you supervise a group of people, it might be the best thing that you could do. If I could get my team functioning at full capacity, everything else would be easier. At home, if I could get my family really engaged in the workings of our household, whatever it might be, it's astounding. So I invite you to take out your brochure, your bulletin again, and I'm going to say it one more time, and I'm going to let you take a moment and, if you want, close your eyes, because there's another important part of goals, and it is writing them down. Goals that live up here, they disappear. So if you are serious about trying this out, see what one goal comes to you right now when I ask you this question. What is the one thing such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary in your life? What one thing would you most like to address? What one thing sparks joy in the doing of it for you? Another way to ask it is, at the end of the year, what's the one thing you want to be so excited to tell someone about? There's an exercise in Prosperity Plus by Mary Mann Morrissey that we do this exercise. You pretend that you meet someone on the street and you turn around and you go, "Hi! Oh my gosh, Elena, I haven't seen you in a year. I am so excited to tell you about what just happened. After I got through the coronavirus in the beginning of the year, everything went great after that. I finally published my book. I finally got a hold of my finances. I finally got back to whatever it is." And so you live it and you embody it, like Edwene did when she affirmed that she was going to Mexico, or she was in Mexico. So at the end of the year, what would you love to tell people when you ran into them on the street? You won't believe what happened this year. You won't believe what I made happen this year. For many people, it's finances. Maybe not everybody, but I talk to a lot of people in a lot of situations in my job. And for most people, the vast majority of people, there is something going on financially that, if it were addressed, could make everything else easier and unnecessary. And that's what happened to Arturo and I a few years ago. My husband and I, we were not in bad shape, but we had a little bit of debt that we'd been carrying, on those 0% credit cards they keep offering you. And we just kept carrying this couple $1,000s, and we didn't really have ourselves set up well. So we made finances our one thing in our marriage. And we both took a class called Financial Peace University by Dave Ramsey. Rocked our world, changed our life. So within a few months, we had started turning our lives around. We're now completely out of debt. We have a 3 to 6 months emergency fund that they tell you to have. We're putting more in our 401k. It just was a first tip of the domino. And having that piece helps us in every other area of our life. So those are just a couple of ways that I have seen that this works. And what is also powerful is, now that you've written it down, if you have, the next best thing you can do is share it. Give it the power of your voice. Share it with someone. Write it down. Edwene tells us to say it out loud 3 times, in the morning and at night. And get to the point where you can say it without even needing to read it. Can you feel the difference of that? That you start to embody it. This is the one thing I'm focusing on right now. And then you can read all about the other techniques in the book, if you want to go ahead and get that, or just look it up online. People are posting about it, and there are support groups. And I'm telling you, be prepared for how amazing the results could be when you take directed faith into one thing, the power of the one. So what happened to Edwene? She didn't have her $200. Lana had her $200. And she was committed to going to Mexico City. We still don't know how it's going to happen. So, after finding out what happened with Lana, it was time for her to go to visit Mom. She went to visit Mom, and she said, oh, talking with her mom and all of that, and oh, you just won't believe what happened to Lana. Her mom paid for the ticket. Oh, and what are you going to do? Well, as she was leaving, her mom said, would you go ahead and get the mail for me? Edwene went out to the mailbox, and she noticed through the mail that there was something addressed to her, which was amazing because she hadn't lived there in 15 years. She was grown and had lived many different places, but here was something in the mail the very day that she picked it up to her. And she opened it up, and this is what she read. From a roommate of hers from over 20 years ago. Hello, Edwene. I don't know where you are these days, but I found your folks in the Houston directory and I sent this to them. Remember all that furniture that we bought when we lived together from the Salvation Army? Well, after you moved out and left it with me because you had moved on, I eventually got married and I sold all of our furniture. Well, it turned out that some of it was quite valuable. And so I got a check for that furniture, and I felt that it was only fair that I give you half of the amount that I got. Here is a check for you. You want to guess what the check was for?
$200.
$200. And that wasn't enough. Edwene tells the postscript to this story. That when she was down in Mexico, Lana got more attention than she did. Lana was apparently maybe just a little more attractive or blonder or something. And so she got a lot of attention from men, and Edwene was feeling a little bit down. And then they went to dinner one night, and a big box of flowers gets delivered to the table, but it's for Lana. So then she's really feeling down. And when Lana goes to the restroom, she's like talking to God, and, you know, God, I deserve that kind of love too and that attention, and I want a sign to tell me that I too am worthy of love. And a minute later, the waiter walked over, this little towel over his arm, and he put down the appetizer, which was olives filled with almonds. That's the kind of life you deserve. You deserve to get boxes of flowers and almonds and checks for $200 and to know that the universe supports you. And you may think, oh, that was Edwene, or is that really going to happen? And who am I to expect some of these things? And I would say, who are you not to? You deserve it. Namaste. I am a sanctuary. I gently close my eyes to enter into this time of sacred connection, letting go, going within, and knowing my truth. And as I prepare, I notice my body first, strong, relaxed, and alert. The perfect vehicle for the soul. And as I let go of a focus on the outer world to the inner, I notice the supportive breath always there, rising up to meet me, this perfect guide. This perfect guide back into the truth. To know that I am whole, calm, peace-filled, and joyful. I am a sanctuary for all that is good, for all that feeds me and lifts me up and heals me and grows me. Everything I need here in this moment. I am worthy, right as I am. I am entitled to divine love and blessings in all my affairs, and I claim them now. I claim my good. The outer world slips into an invisible state for just these few moments, as I know the truth that is everywhere is in this field of potential. I sit in a field of divine potential for all good in all things. It is right here. It is in this breath, in this moment. My consciousness expands to embrace it all, to fully be the Christ, to fully be divine, to be whole and well. And I know this now as I enter into the silence from which everything comes. I know the truth in the silence. I know. Divine love is flowing now into every aspect of my life. This peace goes with me into every interaction throughout the day, into every area of my life. I am filled up from an endless well that is always available. I am grateful to connect in the silence to my core, surrounded by people doing the same thing we are now all strengthened. Our light shines brighter as we go out into the world. And so it is.